Welcome to Unfiltered and Elevated. I'm back with another guest. I'm your host, Carlos Berrigan, and today joining us is Rajesh Tedla. He's the founder of VRT Management Group, LLC. With over 30 years of experience in leadership roles across diverse industries, Rajesh has established himself as an expert in integrating people, process, and culture to drive business success. So welcome, Rajesh.
Thank you very much, Carlos. How are you doing today?
Amazing. So tell us how you ended up in our podcast.
It's always interesting to go back and look at how people end up on podcasts, right? So it's always through network, number one. Referrals, the other piece of it, which I always tell all of my entrepreneurs is, are you very good at networking? What are people talking about you when you leave the room? That is one of the things. And today we are both meeting thanks to Marco introducing my name to you and setting up a meeting with us, which was a Zoom call on Monday. 2 days later, fortunately, I'm here in your neck of the woods. And here we are recording a podcast.
Yeah, I'm a big believer in spontaneous interactions. When you bounce off different spontaneous questions and interactions, it leads to amazing things like this now.
Exactly.
Tell us a little bit about VRT Management Group and what you guys do for small businesses.
VRT Management Group was really established to go back and help businesses. That's the biggest piece of it. If you go back and really look at who we are and what we bring a lot of experience and expertise from the big companies. So I worked personally for GE and GE Capital. And the team, a lot of people have worked for bigger companies across. And we formed a group and said, all the bigger companies have some great tools. But if I really look at it, I always had an appreciation for small businesses. They work so hard, but they don't have the toolkit that really helps them. There is a passion and there is a knowledge of an expertise which they're very good at it. It can be a product, it can be a skill, it can be some of those things. But they don't have the systems, the structure, the people, the culture, which was mostly in the bigger companies. So I said, what can I do to go back and help this? And that's how VRT was born.
Wow. What do you feel like drove you like as a passion to focus on small business versus like the corporate or the larger companies?
Basically, I don't know, when Clinton was in power, President Clinton, they had a program called Business Link. And the Vice President Al Gore himself led this. And what he did was he wanted corporate business people to mentor minority and women-owned businesses. It was, I think, 98 or 99. And then GE had a representative from their side to help the businesses. And that person left and there was a vacuum from a GE leadership. My boss called and said, hey, you always love to go back and do things like that. I want you to take over this. So that was the first exposure for me to working with small businesses. And I was very fascinated because I got a chance to mentor a young lady who inherited the company from her parents. They built the business for 30 years, but they really did not do a great job of really helping and teaching her. And we went there. For me, in 2 hours, I know she was losing money.
Wow.
And she never recognized. She said, I'm running out of cash, but she never recognized that. In 1 year, where she was losing almost 10 to 12%, we went back and changed her business model and really got her on the profitable line. And she went back and came from minus 10% to plus 20%.
What was that change that you think shifted her?
The one was the pricing piece of it. Two, for her to really understand how to price and look at the competition very, very differently. So just to go back and give her, she was making powdered metallurgy parts, which goes into the lipstick. I don't know if you ever saw a lipstick. The weight of the lipstick is very, very small. But at the bottom of that, there is a small powder metallurgy piece to make it feel heavy. That is the piece of it. And that was mass production. So she was very good in doing powder metallurgy, but China was shipping it for 5-10% of the cost. Then I said, why are you competing in a mass product? Going to custom engineering. And then in the 6 months, we changed the business model and she got a contract with a Canadian company for 64 small parts. Chinese can never compete because the quantities were very small and they were custom made. And now she could price it much more appropriately and the customer was very happy.
Wow.
So it was change of business model going from competing in the mass production to custom production.
It's small changes sometimes lead to massive results.
Exactly. Exactly.
What do you think are some problems that a majority of small businesses face when they're starting up and they're either like 1 to 5 year range? Like, what are the biggest problems?
The biggest part of it is they want to conserve cash, which is a very, very good idea, but they don't know where to stop. They want to do every single activity by themselves. And after a certain time, they need to go back and see what is the value they bring. An example, I tell my small business owners, whomever I coach, I have the privilege of coaching almost 1,300 plus people in this last 20 years. One of the things I say is, if there is something that is going to save you anything less than $1,000, you should not be touching that. Your time is more valuable. Delegate it to somebody or hire a consultant to do it for $50 so that you can take your time and energy and put it into some of the bigger aspects. So you developing an idea as a CEO or going after a customer and closing a deal is much more valuable than you going back and doing the job here and saving $50 or $100 there.
One of the things I like to think about is, if it's less than, how many people would it take to hire to replace me, and add that up hourly? And if I'm not doing something that should align with those hourly rates, I probably shouldn't be doing it. And I guess in the beginning, it's really hard to find someone to do that, because you have to trust them. You have to figure out how they're going to follow through on everything. You set up your systems and processes. And that's another question I have. How do you recommend smaller companies to start when there's no systems or processes in place so that they can take that to the next level? Because I feel like that's a block.
So if you go back and look at it, there are no documented systems, but there are always systems. Any small company, because there is a process for everything. Because if you're running right now, let us say if I go and look at your documentation for any company, they don't have any documentation, but they have a system. They know what needs to be done. So there are always going to be systems. How well it is documented is a second question. So that is what I want all the owners, business owners and CEOs to think about is, think of it. You always have processes. Are they consistent from A to B and C? Yeah, there is a lack of consistency. That is when you bring the documentation piece of it. So my whole piece of it is, when you are a company from, let us say, my stage 1 definition is 1 to 10 employees. Stage 2 is 11 to 20. Stage 3 is 21 to 34. We have like that on 7 stages. That is something which Dr. Fisher has done a lot of research, and I use that a lot in helping my companies grow. But if you look at it, generally up to 25 to 30, that is when I want much more formal documented systems. Until then, make sure that they understand what is required, because you're small enough that you can work with it. So don't focus on that. Focus on the strategy. Focus on the front end of the piece of it. So stage 1 and stage until you're 20 employees, the biggest part of it, the owner, I tell them, is focus on bringing in the business. We'll figure out how to execute, but bringing in the business, because it is do or die. You know, almost 55 to 60% of the businesses are out of business in 5 years. And somebody says it is 80%. I always do the research, but I don't have a good number to give. But at least 85 to 90% of the businesses are out of business before their 10th anniversary. I have seen a lot of those things. And the biggest reason is some of these things. Doing the right thing at the right time. I tell the same thing. If execution, you can bring somebody to do it. But selling, you cannot do it. Because you are passionate about it. You know your product. You know your service. So you have to focus on what you're doing good at it and then bring it.
As you talk about that, we realized we went through those stages. We first started, we were just getting business, doing projects, and then we said, we run into troubles, issues, and then, a couple of years later, we said, wait a minute. We have to focus on the system somehow. We can't just be running crazy, because now we had upset clients.
Yes.
Like, hey, you guys forgot this. What happened there? This person didn't call me back. And so we're like, okay, we have to establish some kind of system, something.
Yes.
And then we get back to it. And again, a new problem.
Exactly.
And so I guess it just comes with, like you said, wherever you're at, you need to figure out what to set during those time frames.
And one of the biggest thing I tell people is learn, unlearn, and relearn. That is one of the biggest mantra I tell people is, at stage 1, you're learning something and you're running your business. When you come to stage 2, 20 people, there are certain things that are obsolete now. You have to unlearn them and relearn them. Now you go to stage 3. There are certain things you unlearn and relearn. And stage 4, where I call it is moving away from an entrepreneurship-led company to becoming more of a professional organization. Now it is not anymore the owner or the founder, but now the organization and the entity becomes there. And then stage 4, I tell people, that is where you bring in some experienced people. Somebody who has been there, done that, because you need to bring that bureaucracy. You need to bring in the system, because their faulty systems will really can wipe you out.
When I did the entrepreneurship scaling program at Stanford, I learned a lot about business, and I realized we weren't even close to where we should have been. And I was thinking, oh, it's time to scale. It's time to scale our company. And we look back and we're like, we don't even have all the systems documented. What's the process of each thing? How is it done? Capital, I didn't even think of that. Like, okay, you need money to hire more people and to grow the company to the next level. So all these things that you don't think about when you want to grow. You just think, oh, well, just do it more. And one of the biggest things that stuck to me from that program was the broken windows.
Yes.
As soon as I realized that, I started taking action in different areas of our company. But do you want to talk a little bit about that?
Broken windows is one of the biggest lessons for anybody to think about it. So based on, if you look at the real life of the projects, there are always going to be certain things that have to be done at the right time. So sometimes if you are faster to the market, you have issues. Sometimes you're slower to the market, you have issues. You need to constantly keep on the pulse of what is happening with the market and then make the appropriate schedules. Most of the broken windows come into picture when the timing is not right. That's what happens. And the second part of it is, a lot of people think if I bring in the people, the problem will be solved. They forget that they have to be trained. They have to be really built and integrated into the system from a values perspective, from a role perspective, from a skill perspective. And a lot of people forget that just bringing people is not enough. The whole recruitment piece and the talent management piece is one of the biggest pieces a lot of people miss as well. I'll just give you one of my clients from Houston. He's into the energy beverages kind of a startup kind of a company. They went and bought some of the people from the big brand beverage companies. From a privacy perspective, I don't want to give out the names to safeguard everybody's interest. But they spent almost like $2 million in payroll, bringing some very, very high-powered people into the organization. And since I was his advisor, I looked at it and said, we don't want so many people coming from here. He said, Raj, they have done great and everything else. I understand your judgment. My job is to advise you, and with that, 18 months, over 2 million lost, and all of them were fired. Over 2 million in payroll and benefits and everything else was lost. Because those people's capacity was they go how to sell when they have a big brand name. I can sell GE because everybody knows what GE is. It's much more easier for me to sell GE. But if they want to go back and sell VRT, nobody knows what VRT is. My circle, my clients know that. Anybody outside would not know. So it takes a total different mindset and a skill set to sell. And that is what people forget. So that fit of the right person, bringing in the right people, integrating them in the right way, that is one big piece. That is what we call the people transformation piece of it. And the second part of it is the strategy piece of it. The strategy piece is I have a skill set. Like, I'll take my own example. I can coach anybody, a CEO from a Fortune 500 company to a CEO of a $1 million startup. But can I go back and market it to everybody else? I can't. So where is my passion? Small businesses. So that is what I focus on. I have a few clients who are much bigger than 250 employees or greater, but they have come to me through a network and I did no selling, so they're my clients. So that is part of the strategy. Who do you want to go after? Are you passionate about it? Are you going to go back and look at it? So those are the things when you're starting 1, 2, and 3 stages, you want to focus on. And then take the information out, work with them properly, and then you go back and say, you know what, this is working, this is not working.
Super valuable information, for small business and applying those things immediately.
Yes.
One of the biggest problems we have in our company is when we think about marketing and sales.
Yes.
We get into a cycle of like, okay, bring in some sales guys, but then it's like, who's going to bring the leads?
Yes.
How are they, where will they get the contacts? Who will they call? And so it's like a back and forth cycle of what do you do first? Do you ramp up the marketing to bring in all the visibility and then you start having phone calls, or do you bring in the salespeople first and then ramp up the marketing so they have the business funneling so they can sell?
Your business is a very interesting case piece of it, right? First, I would not do either or. I would sit with you and say, how did you figure out and grow to the stage you grew today? So you're a successful company today, right? So how did you grow? What are some of your strengths? What I call it is a SWOT analysis: strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threat. I would really understand where your core competencies are and what are you good at. And then I would go bring in the right person to amplify the strengths and mitigate the weaknesses. My own business, I do a lot of work on LinkedIn. I don't have a sales team. I don't have anything else. Now, after 16 years in the business, I have 3 or 4 people. But all of mine was networking through LinkedIn, because that was my strength. I know how to approach people. I have connections then, and I can ask for referrals. And there is already a trust factor there because I'm going through somebody else. I mean, we both sitting here because of the trust was built because somebody recommended me to you. And that is the network piece of it. So for you, we need to look at the business side of it and say, hey, how is that? Who is your market? What is that? So the strategy piece becomes much more important before I go back, say either or. So if you go back and say, Raj, I want to triple my business in the next 3 years. So I'll ask you 3 fundamental questions. Do you have the money? Do you have the right people? And is the market able to handle that kind of growth? That is the strategy question you go back and look at.
Those are questions that where do you even go to find the answers to that? Does the market have the ability to take that on? Where would you even start with those kind of questions?
If you go back and really even networking with people and looking at your own win role. So if you go back and look at it, like one of my clients I'm working with, their bids to win ratio is less than 5%. So technically there is a lot of opportunity there. So he wanted to go back and expand in different states. I said, why? You go back and increase your 5% to 15% to 20% first. Become a big player in your area because there's so much of potential here. You don't need to go back and open an office 200 miles away in a different city and start from scratch. You look at your win ratio. The win-loss ratio gives me an idea what your market is looking like. And then you have part of your society and your engineers association, construction business. Every single industry group has some of the network. And even casually talking about it, you can do what we call secondary research. Primary research is we going back and doing a full-blown research, which takes time, energy, and stuff. But the secondary research is, hey, what has been your experience? What has been your experience in collecting all the information and making that? Remember, we are very, very small compared to the overall market piece of it. So secondary research can go back and give us enough information to work with. Once you are a 50 million, 100 million, that's a different ballgame. But right now, when you are less than $10, $20 million, you can go back and look at it from secondary research and have enough information to make those decisions. Yeah, marketing companies will go back and say, hey, spend $20,000 on this or $50,000 on this and do the research. Yeah, that is great. But if you're a $100 million company or a $500 million company, not for a $5 million company. So those are the kind of changes and differences I go back and look at a lot. So I get to see that because I worked in the big companies, I see how that works. Now I come back and say, you don't need that. Why are we looking at this?
So it seems like from what you're saying, a lot of your action steps go back to strategy.
Yes.
And what is that strategy? What's that plan? And that's something we were missing. When we started, we just said, let's hire someone, bring someone in, hire a marketing company, hire a sales team. We're just testing things out. But we realized, what's the real strategy?
Exactly.
What are we doing this for? Where are we going to be at in 10 years? And what type of market? And then that brings me to the client side of things. In our industry, if we end up with a client that ends up, that we end up on bad terms, it can be very expensive for us.
Yes.
And if you think about places like Amazon or other big companies, they're just bringing on, they don't pick and choose, they're selling to everyone now. And the goal for us is we would like to get to that point where we can just take everything and everyone on, but it's really difficult for us to figure out who is our client and who do we want to work with, because there's certain people that are very difficult to work with if they don't communicate well.
Yes.
Maybe the resources aren't there to support what they're trying to do. It gets really difficult in our field. when we're building, when a problem comes up.
Yes.
And just what would be your advice in dealing with that problem?
Since you're talking about the Amazon, right? But when Amazon started in '89, if you look at one of the picture of Jeff Bezos floating around, that room was worse than the room we are sitting in. It was in the basement with no finished basement with wires all over the table. So everybody started there. But his vision was so big. And if you look at it, he started with one item, books. And he mastered that to the level that nobody can even think about it. Then he started diversifying. See, that is what people need to look at it. What is that you are very, very good at it? So right now, if you go back and look at it, you are an interior designer, right? That is what your business is. It's all about design and build. That is your specialty. But within that piece of it, you want to go back and say, who is the ideal client that you can go back and bid for? See, you can do a design for $1 million. You can do a design for 100 million. That is your technology, right? You have the skill set and everything else. But if I give you a 50 million or a 100 million, I don't think you can handle it today. You have to grow to that stage. You might have only 2 or 3 project managers today. Then you might be needing 50 project managers. So those are the kind of parameters you want to always keep thinking about and say, today I can serve this market and this is what the scope of this market is. Let's go back and capitalize that and become very, very good at that piece of it. Then I can go back and start looking at it and saying, should I grow vertically or horizontally? That is again a strategy piece of it. I talk a lot about strategy, but not formal strategy, but you need to think about it. Where can I serve the client better? Or where will they come back to us? And like one of the mentors, when he explained about strategy, that was the best word. You know what strategy is? What are you going to do and what are you not going to do? That is the simplest form of strategy for me. People think of all this huge analysis and everything. No, go back and tell you what are you focused on and then deliver on that. I'm not going to touch this. Let us not go there. If you get a great idea, yeah, let us put it on the burner. Let us look at it. And if there is really valid, then let us go back and look at it.
That just brought me to realize that when we first started, we started with the construction side only. So we would take everything on. Bathrooms, kitchens, baseboards, whatever it was, bring it on, we'll take it on.
Yes.
And then we started realizing that everything that's made has a plan. So we were having problems with clients, we were having issues, something we didn't know answers to things, materials, disorganization. And so we thought, you know what, let's bring in the design side of things. We'll develop the plans for people. We'll develop all the elevations, all the details to make sure that the client knows what they're getting and we could price it out before we start.
Yes.
So that was a huge game changer and that unlocked almost like a whole nother business inside of our business. So now it's 2, the design side and the construction side. And we were looking for ways to work with a lot of architects, engineers, and we realized they're taking too long to get us our plans back so we can start the projects. So that's when we're like, if we do it in-house, we do the design, funnel it to the construction, and now we're good to go.
Exactly.
And so that process was, I think that goes into a little bit about thinking vertically versus horizontally. And
yes.
And we're thinking about this. We say eventually, should we have a ton of engineers, architects, the whole entire process behind one company? Or should we just stick to the design and build side? And that goes back to strategy again.
Exactly. What is your core competency? What are your strengths? Can we go back and solve problems? Those 3 things you have very clearly done. That's the reason why you are in the design and build stage right now.
What do you think is, how there's certain stages companies are at?
Yes.
They'll reach certain milestones of revenue and have certain issues. How do you break those up? And how do you know what stage those are in rough?
See, most of the time, there are 2 models there. One is the revenue model where people look at it and say, okay, if you're 10 million, this is the stage you are in, 25 million, these are such stage. I believe more in the complexity because of the people. If you really go to it, anything automation, it doesn't matter there are 2 people or 5 people, right? Automation is automation. You get it done. But whenever you add people, the complexity increases. And Dr. James Fisher's research was all about that. That's the reason why I'm so fascinated about it. And he has something called stages of growth. So you have 7 stages before you become a 500 employee company. That was all of his research. And I became a big fan of it. I'm certified in his material and I use that with all of my clients. And that is what I was saying. When you have 1 to 10 is stage 1. 11 to 19 is stage 2. 20 to 34 is stage 3. 35 to 56 is stage 4. So for me, stage 4 is one of the biggest and the most important part. If you go back and look at a lot of the businesses who started as a passion as an entrepreneur, they get stuck somewhere between stage 2 and 3. And after that, they become the slaves for their business because they have not changed, they have not adapted, they have not done anything. And then they're stuck and it becomes a job. Burnout happens for entrepreneurship. Burnout is also very, very high because they try to do everything themselves. So as an example, I'll give you stage 1. You can run the way you read it. It's all about you, the founder of the company, running everything. As soon as stage 2 comes, I go back and say, have you identified 2 people where you will be delegating responsibility? As soon as you hit double digits, you need to have 2 people. One most probably from the finance, everything else, one from the operations side. Because you still want to be the person who is bringing in the business development, focus on that piece of it. Because we are not out of danger until we get to like 20 plus employees. But if you don't identify those 2 people in stage 2, what happens? Your 8 to 10 hours becomes 15 hours, 16 hours. Now you keep multiplying and adding another 10, 15 more employees. What happens? Company complexity has increased. Now you don't have anybody to delegate. So now either you're sacrificing your health, your family life, or whatever other life you have because you're spending 20 hours in the office. So there you have the capacity, you can handle it. Maybe you can go to stage 3, but you're stuck there, you can't grow. Then you go back and bring somebody and say, okay, you know what, I need to start delegate. But you have been so ingrained in the business, you'll never find somebody who can do as good as you are because you've been doing this for so many years. Now again, you're stuck. So that mind shift has to happen from that. So we tell, as soon as you get to 11, who are your right hand, left hand people? What skills are you helping them to develop? What are you doing that?
When you start talking about delegating,
Yes.
how do you know what to delegate and how to delegate those tasks? Because like if you ask me, I have tons of things that I need to delegate right away, but I guess there's certain risks, right? There's
Yes.
certain risks to delegating things, and that's what's really hard for us to understand. How do you know what to delegate and in what order?
So basically you go back and look at it and say, what is your strength first? Don't delegate your strength. Delegate something that you're not so fan. Like for me, I'll take my own example. I got an MBA in strategy and finance. So I understand all of the finances. Do I enjoy doing that? No. For the first couple of years, I looked at it because I need to create the systems and stuff. Now I don't spend more than 2 hours because I have a chartered accountant, my CPA, they look at all of those things. Once a month, I go spend 2 to 3 hours, take care of the things, and then I walk out. When it comes to coaching, I don't delegate that. That is my passion, and I can bring maximum value to them. So it starts with you and the leadership team. What are some of the things that you bring to the table you are fascinated about? It comes to you like second nature. So don't give that up. Give up something where you are average at best. Again, it's very difficult for entrepreneurs to say average at best. But always, if you look at it, there are certain things we are great, certain things we are not so great. And that is where you start delegating that. And then go back and see who is passionate about it. There are some people, basically my chartered accountant, anytime you talk about numbers, he's just excellent at it. So I found somebody who is living their element, and that person loves finance, and I have given it to them. So it's a win-win situation for both of us. And that is the way you start off with everything else. And by the time you come to stage 3 and 4, you start defining the roles, and then you recruit the right person for the role. See, a lot of people, when we are growing, we want to pick somebody, oh, this guy is very smart, or this person is very good. So you have that gut feels because of your nature or meeting them in some networking meetings and stuff. That's great. But if you really don't go back and say, what is the role you're bringing to them? Then it becomes very difficult. So in my business, and when we talk about it, I talk something called a 3D job description. My job descriptions are almost 4 pages, 5 pages. Everybody says, Raj, this is a lot of information. I said, if the person you are hiring doesn't have the patience to read a 4-page document, how am I going to pay him 50,000, 100,000, 200,000 to do a job? We need to be clear. And if we can't articulate what we want the person to do, how can you measure him for success?
Yeah, that was one big thing we realized. We're like, if this person can't fill out a proper application, is that really someone you want to hire?
Exactly. That's a good one. Yes.
You know, it's and we started realizing this. We're like, wait a minute. Why are we having to send it back? Hey, fill this out properly. Hey, you forgot this. Hey, do this. And we're like, you know what?
No.
We can't have that person working with us. that's going to be an issue from the
Yes.
start.
Exactly.
And yeah, those are super valuable things. That it goes again back to your strategy.
So job description, when I talk about people, the first 3D is called three-dimensional. I came up with the name, me and my mentor. So the first thing is, what is the role accountable for? So every job has between 4 and 6 accountabilities. What are the accountabilities? So that person who is coming into the role are responsible for delivering those 4 to 6 things. The second dimension is, what are some of the tasks they need to consistently do so that they can deliver that accountability? And the third piece of it is, how I'm going to measure success. The more I can tell them upfront, this is how I'm going to measure. So in GE, Jack Welch, who was the CEO when I was working there and stuff, what gets measured gets done. That is human nature, right? If I go hold you accountable, then you're going to do that piece of it. So let us go back and tell them even before we hire them. If we go back and have a 3D job description, they know what are they accountable for. They know the tasks they need to complete. They know how they're going to be measured. Don't you think you can pick the right person for it? You can ask the right questions for it. So we can ask the right questions. And I don't know if you're familiar with psychometric analysis. So basically you understand what their behaviors are, what their driving forces are, what their competencies are. That can be another component of doing the assessment to understand what their natural driving forces are.
Yeah, that one's huge. We just had a leadership coach come in and do that on us, and then we implemented it with our team. So we said we all need to learn how to work together, and what motivates you, what drives you, what are ways that you do what you do well.
Yes.
And what are things you don't do well, so we can find either that you don't have to do that or get someone else to do that.
Or start bartering and just modify a few things and say, hey, you take on this responsibility, I'll take on that. And that will make it very, very easy for everybody. Once everybody's basically working in their element, what comes naturally to them and they're motivated, you see huge productivity. We have seen basically almost 40-50% increase in productivity when we had the driving forces, what the job requires with the right person matching, nothing else.
Wow.
40 to 50%.
It's massive.
Massive.
What is a common trait you see with smaller companies and their leadership? Like, what would you say? Can you look at a company and say, you're the type of leader that will take this company to the next level?
I can't just tell them by talking. I can get a feeling for it. But definitely I will do the psychometric analysis of it and look at what their leadership practices are, what their experiences are. So definitely I can do a 360. I can do a psychometric analysis and then look at it and say, hey, these are some of your driving forces. So I have a CEO, basically he has 3 children, 2 boys and a girl. And the father was like debating who should be there and stuff. So we did all the analysis and everything else. And we went back and said, so they expected the middle person to be the least. But based on all the analysis and stuff, the middle child was the best. And fast forward 10 years, basically he has tripled the business.
From using that report?
And then all the coaching and everything, not just the report, but they went back and said, okay, we will make you the president, go back and see how you can run and everything else. The new ideas he bought, everything else he bought. And now he bought over the parents, bought their share, he took over, he bought over the brother share, he's 100% owner of the company. Because the sibling said, we don't want to work very hard. He said, fine, then if you want an exit strategy, let us evaluate it and stuff. So they got together and now he owns 100% of the company. And they're growing like crazy.
What do you think separates, because it's difficult to look at it when you're looking at multiple owners, right, and multiple leaders in an organization, but when we're a smaller company and there's say 2 or 3 owners, I feel like you have your doer, your executioner, and you have the the visionary. You know, there's a fine line between those two, because one person can't just be in the clouds all day.
Yes.
And the other person can't just be on the details all day. But when they both come together, how do you get those two to work simultaneously for the overall success of the organization?
The first piece of it is trust. So basically, if you go back and talk about the visionary piece of it versus the executioner, we'll take that simple example, basically. The visionary is always futuristic thinking. They're going to be on top of things. And there is always an urgency behind them. Hey, we need to do this, we need to do this. So we call them the builders. Always we need a builder in the business, optimistic couldn't run that. And the person who is execution, they're always, we call them the protectors. They're risk averse. They want to look at the business, make sure we are not getting there. And the combination of that is the strength of the business. You don't want taking too much risks or you don't want to take too little risks. And the one I'm talking you about, the 7 stages of growth, we do an organizational assessment and we show you. So basically you want 66% builder, 33% when you are a stage 3 company. When you are a stage 4 company, 1:1. You don't want to grow fast. You want to build your systems perfectly because now you're up to 50, 55 employees. You want to prioritize and build the processes and the systems and everything else. Then suddenly you become 3:1 again. So you'll be 75% growth in stage 5 because you build the systems, you bought the people, everything else. Now we have the capacity, just let us run and grow the business. All of this is like a glue when they trust each other. You don't have the trust piece, everything else is gone. So if you can build the trust between the two people and both of them say, you know what? Hey, Carlos is great in the visionary piece of it. Let me listen to him and stuff. And then come back and say, Carlos, you're talking about all these things, great, but where is the money coming from? The protector mindset comes. Then you need to stop back and say, you know what? That's a great question. Let us sit and talk. Or let us bring in the finance guy or whoever is supporting you. Let us talk about those things. So when the trust is built between those two people and you identify both their strengths, then it can grow very fast. I mean, if you look at any of the big companies, right? Bill Gates, Facebook, anything, there is always a second and a third person. HP. Any company you take, there are always two people. I have yet to hear a company which only grew with one person. They always had that because you always, only a builder will not build it because it is too risk and you'll get into risk and financial problems, or it is too conservative that somebody will come and overtake you and buy you out. The combination of that is very important and you always need that two people. If you understand it, it is a strength. If you don't understand it, it becomes a liability.
Wow, that's powerful information there. We're always going back and forth on these things like, okay, what do we do? How do we do it? Who's going to do what? Who's responsible for what?
And that's again going back to the strategy and say, did you take the time to come up with a strategy? And now both of you are working towards the goal of the strategy rather than it is you versus me.
And what would you say if two people have, they both have their different visions for the overall company? One person wants to do it one way and the other person wants to do it the other way.
So that is when you bring in a facilitator and then really help until you come up with an understanding. If it takes you 2 days or 3 days, that is perfectly fine. It is worth spending 3 days with let us say the facilitator is an external person and they charge you 5,000 or 10,000. It is still worth it because you got the whole year to go back and implement that piece of it. So somehow you need to go into the meeting and say, hey, we are coming out of this with some sort of an agreement. Sometimes they might not agree with it because it was not their idea, but once we come out, they're going to support it 100% and execute it. That is the agreement you need to come out. So when we're building a culture for people, right, all of the people, they look at 3 aspects. One is what is the purpose of the organization? What is the vision? What are the values? But the things which we go back and work with the companies is we go back and say, what are the accountabilities and what are the norms? And one of the accountability is, irrespective of my stance or my idea, if the team agrees on something, we need to support it 100%. That is an accountability. All of my leaders are accountable for that. If the marketing person says we need to use $5 million for sales, just as an example, and then that is only when we can do it. The board or the team says, no, it is 2.5 and you need to figure out how to do it. He might not agree or she might not agree, but they're working with the 2.5 and they're working wholeheartedly. Once we come out of it, that is then accountability for the leadership. So we come up with like 6 to 8 accountabilities for the leadership team. And the norm is everybody in the company has to follow those things. Basically, are you hiring for the long term? Never hire somebody for short term. If you want a short term, get a temporary person. It's not a full-time role. But if you're hiring a full-time, think of it from 3 to 5 years. How will they fit into that? If they don't fit in that, you can't justify it. Hold on it, let us get a temporary person, then we decide what to do with it on a long-term person. So those are kind of the norms and that becomes part of your culture.
So right now, in the times we're in, how do you see small businesses shifting and what's your approach on AI and implementing that in your business right now?
So basically, one of the things for sure, AI is going to change the life completely. There's no two ways about it. With the kind of research that is going on and the investment that is happening and everything else, basically the train has left the station. If you don't adapt it, you're going to be in trouble. What you need to look at it is, where will it really help me to be more productive? That is the biggest question. So I'll give you my own example. I had somebody who was doing writing and everything else because that's not my strength. I'm more mediocre on writing and stuff. I have my ideas, but I want somebody to refine it and do it. I was spending significant amount of money. Now I don't have anybody now. Since I got the ChatGPT, I paid the professional $20 per month and I got everything I need. I trained 2 of my people and told them how to start the 50-60% of it. So I have a student who is right out of university, less than 3 months experience, doing 80% of the work what this person was charging me thousands of dollars. So I know what exactly I want. So I trained the person in less than 3 months, and with ChatGPT and her skill set, she's giving me everything I want. So my time went up by a couple of hours. But I'm saving a lot of time and energy and I'm adapting, and I'm coming out much faster than what it used to be. My turnaround time was 15 days, 10 days in the past. Now it is like 24 hours, 36 hours. And sometimes if the person is on vacation, I said, okay, fine, I'll take an hour. I do something on ChatGPT and I have it immediately done. So that is a simple example of that. So if you look at the finance operation, you can automate a lot of those things in the finance piece of it. Look at the operations piece of it, you can do a lot of it. So definitely every single owner, business person right now, they need to get themselves familiar with that. Because every 2 months, there is a new wave of learning and development coming into the AI. So don't get hung up on that, but at least let us be in there really trying to understand what the consequences are. 18 to 24 months from today, it's going to be a very, very different business. I feel like I will be obsolete because ChatGPT can do what I'm doing. So I need to look at it as well.
And you know what's even more interesting? Even just yesterday, I called, I would say about 15 construction companies. Maybe 4 or 5 of them answered their phone. And I was like, how is that possible? You know, there's answering services, there's, you know, virtual assistants, there's so many things you can use to just answer your phone. Because you're like, when we call a company, if we need something, if they don't answer, we go to the next company in line. And so imagine how much business these companies are losing just from a simple thing like not answering the phone. But yeah, that was mind blowing to me. Like right now at this time, and you're calling a company, they don't answer their phone.
So it's going to be completely automated next year. Basically, the choice for them will be like 50 cents per call or 20 cents because it becomes very cheap. So everybody can be affording that. They just need to modify a few of their systems and everything else, and they'll be done with it. I mean, if you look at the number of companies working on ChatGPT related items, huge. AI is so huge everywhere across.
Yeah, I just saw NVIDIA. They just surpassed Apple.
Yes.
For one of the biggest companies, most valuable companies
cents per dollar wise, valuation wise. And just because of the chips they can provide for AI. And now did you see basically all the laptops? It's a new ball game now. Who is going to get the NVIDIA chips and make it AI friendly? So the laptop wars will be so huge in the next 6 months. HP has already announced those things. Dell has already announced those things. I have not heard from Microsoft yet, but I'm sure they're doing something because they don't announce, they just do it.
Yeah, what will be super interesting to me is when they implement like ChatGPT technologies into the home space, into managing your home and it being on a computer inside your home.
I mean, all of those things. First, the businesses, it will be there for the businesses because that is where the money is to make. Because household people are the last to start investing things. And it is more of a B2C market. First, you want to capture the B2B. Anything is B2B market first. So that is where they will go most of the time. And that's what my expectation is and whatever I'm hearing from my friends and whoever are working on those things. So the next 2 to 3 years will be B2B as the biggest focus. And then the B2C will come. I mean, B2C, there are smaller things like you controlling everything, all of your lights, the Internet of Things 4.0. So you control your light bulbs, your TVs, everything, wherever you are. That has already been there. The next phase, I think it will come after the B2B revolution. At least that's my opinion.
Yeah, I think the basics are there for stuff like that, like turn on the thermostat, lock my door. But I think the next level is going to be like, you know, ChatGPT, call a construction company with the highest rating to come and give me a price or give me a price on something.
Yes. Oh, those automation things will be much, much more. There's so much of consolidation that will happen for sure. There's no two ways about it.
If you're about to help a small business with your services, what are things that you decide this is a company I want to work with?
So the first piece of it I'll see is the leadership team and the founder. So one of the reasons why I like the small businesses is if I can talk to the founder, the partner, or somebody, then there's no point. Because if there is no buy-in from the top, there is nothing that is going to change. And that's the reason why I go to the smaller businesses. Even if I go to a company with 1,000 employees, sometimes the CEO is not available, somebody else is there. And they can make an impact on their team or their 5 people or 10 people or their department that company-wide they can't do it. So for me, one of the biggest criteria is basically, is the leadership willing to change? That's my number one criteria. How bad the situation is, it doesn't bother me. They should be in a position to go back, willing to listen, learn, unlearn, relearn. That is my criteria for it. And are they financially still not too bad? If they're too bad in financially, then there is no point. They need to look at the finance rather than trying to fix everything else. Then I go back and say, hey, try to get your financial order, get somebody with the finance background to look at it and see what you can come up with. Then we can talk about everything else. But the biggest part of it is the leadership team. If the leadership team is not ready, then there is no point in wasting time. I don't want to waste their time, my time. Money is basically, people say money, but I said no. Time is more valuable. The money will come. It doesn't matter who, the right person, the money is always there.
When you're looking at a company, is there a specific industry you like to work with, or is it just all small business in general?
All small businesses. Basically, I work with language services company. I work with interior designers. I work with construction companies. I work with engineering companies. I work with architects. I work with consumer goods. I work with grocery stores. I work with beverage companies. So for me, it is industry neutral because I'm working with strategy and people, and that is not going to change anything. And whatever I do is always going to be industry neutral. And if at all there is an expertise I need, the people, if I go back and talk about design and build, right, I don't need to be a designer or a builder. That is the expertise you already have. That's the reason why you're in business. I'm only helping to set up, is this the right person? Is this the right process? Is this the right system, structure? That is what I bring to the table. Do you have the right strategy? If I want to be a designer, then I might have a design company rather than being there trying to help somebody else, right? So I'm not going to be interested in the design build because that's not my expertise. And the second advantage for me, somebody like me who works with multiple, I look at it from a very, very different perspective. Because I see an industry with beverage, let us say, and I can take the knowledge and say, why are you guys doing it this way? The curiosity part of it is very different. So I can go back and challenge a lot of the assumptions piece of it.
You're like the behind the scenes engine. You know, you have the basics of how an engine runs well.
Yes.
And every business that comes in that engine, you tweak it up, fix it up.
Customization there.
And all the different engines you've worked on before.
All of that knowledge is always available. In fact, that is what my biggest thing my mentor is advising me to do is get your own ChatGPT version of it. Take all of your knowledge and get somebody to program and have you this thing. And then you can ask any question you want. And that is one of the things we just started brainstorming last week. So small businesses need to look at it and say, how do you go back and look at it? So I'm telling my guy in India to hire 2 people right out of college who are very, very hunger for learning knowledge. See how they work for 2-3 months, and then we'll get involved with that.
To develop your AI?
Basically the AI for what I do and what all my expertise captured into one of those chat GPTs.
You're leveraging yourself now.
Exactly. And that's what they said. Go back and bring everything to the surface.
And so if a small business is looking for developing strategies, growing their business, and having you on their team, what does that process look like? What do they have to do, and where do they find you?
So the biggest part of it is I tell people is first have a discussion, because I like exactly like what we did on Monday is get onto a Zoom call and talk for about an hour and see what is that, because sometimes it might not be the right time as well. So for me, whenever I look at it, my business piece of it, I always want it to be a win-win situation. It is not about the money and anything else and stuff. It is a win-win situation. So my vision is when I work with a company, whatever I do with them, if I'm been with them for at least 6 months to a year, I really want them to have a minimum of 1 million impact. So before I retire, my vision is basically at least help 1,000 people who have got $1 million in value to their org. Not my fees, the $1 million to them. That way I can say, hey, I touched entrepreneurs to the tune of $1 billion. That's my vision. I'm at about 440 million so far.
Well, you're halfway there almost.
I'm halfway there. So the goal is by 2030, I need to get there in 6 years. That's the reason why I'm getting a team to work with and develop and accelerate the process.
Yeah, you'll get there. It seems like you have the drive, you have the motivation, you have the skills. You'll be there, I think,
They'll be
sooner.
there. Yeah, I love it and stuff. So they can go to my website, VRT9.com. That is the name of the company. That is the website. They can go back and click on the button and set up a Zoom call with me. Everybody has the opportunity to do that.
Yeah, I saw when I went through your process, that was super easy. Went on the website, scheduled the appointment with you, and boom,
Yes.
booked, had you on the Zoom call, and now you're here.
Exactly. Make it very simple. Make it easy for everybody to come.
Awesome, Rajesh. Well, thank you for coming on the podcast. It was a pleasure having you here, and hopefully all the listeners take this knowledge and implement it in their business and contact you too to help them develop these strategies.
Sure, I would love to. That is my mission, to go back and have win-win solutions, and entrepreneurship is something which I love to do. So thank you for the opportunity. I'm looking forward to go back and see how we can contribute more.
And if there's one message you can leave all the small businesses out there, what would it be?
Basically, accelerate your change adoption. Change is going and happening at a very, very fast pace. So you need to accelerate how fast you are changing. It is like AI right now. It is going to change the world in 2 years. So we need to be ready to go back and embrace the change. Be comfortable with change. Keep on focusing on it, and be comfortable about changing yourself and your teams. That is the biggest piece of what I would say is change. If you don't embrace change, you're going to be in trouble. You can be the best in whatever you do today, but in 3 years, you have competition and somebody else is knocking at your door.
So change fast, and change well.
Exactly. Perfectly. Very well put. Thank you for that, Carlos.
Thank you for coming. Appreciate you.
You're welcome. It was a pleasure.